The worst kept new vehicle secret for 2020 has to be the supercharged Ram 1500, the Ram 1500 TRX. But today we know all of the details and we know it's going to be on sale here very soon. I have to say, this is the new car launch that probably made me smile the most this calendar year. So let's go through what we know now. The first and biggest thing is that the rumor mills were telling us that we were going to be getting a detuned version of the Hellcat engine. So rather than producing 700 horsepower or 710 or even 717 horsepower, most of the rumor mills were telling us to expect about 600 horsepower, but those rumors proved to be wrong because we're getting 702 horsepower, making this easily the most powerful pickup truck you can buy in America right now. And with that engine, we have some truly insane performance figures. We'll dive into this a little bit more in a bit, but right up front, it's going to go 0 to 60 in 4.5 seconds. Yes, in a half-ton pickup truck, and they're claiming a quarter-mile time of 12.9 seconds at 108 miles an hour with a top speed of 118 miles an hour in a pickup truck. But oddly enough, the TRX isn't just about 0 to 60 numbers. This is about Baja running, very similar, of course, to the Ford Raptor, but this definitely dials the number way up past 10 versus the twin turbocharged V6 that we find in the Raptor. As we see in the Ford, there have been some pretty major body changes to the Ram 1500 in order to support the TRX package. So let's talk about what's going on the outside, then we'll talk about what's going on under the skin, and then on the inside, then we'll dive deeper into some of the specifics. So the first thing you'll notice is that the Ram TRX is wider, and it's not a little bit wider, it's 8 inches wider than a regular Ram 1500. So that puts this, in terms of vehicle width, somewhere between the average half-ton truck and the average one-ton dually out there. This is a really wide machine. It was all done to accommodate a 6-inch increase in the vehicle's track, and that is the distance that the wheels are apart from one another. You'll really notice that up front, where we now have some new vents on each side of the headlamp modules, so a lot of the components are shared with the Ram 1500, but there are definitely a lot of unique components in order to make the vehicle wider. It doesn't simply look like they tacked on some tacky fender flare extensions. Instead, Ram did something very similar to what we see in the Ford Raptor, where they've used some of the same components from the base truck and then widened around them to give us this different look. It really has sort of a flare-side pickup truck look, to be honest. It also has a very large and functional hood scoop with some lights in there, just so you know that this thing is coming down the road, and some huge louvers on the hood as well. Now, the TRX is going to come only one way, as a 4-door pickup truck with the 5-foot 7-inch bed. So if you want the longer bed or you want a smaller cab, etc., you're going to have to look at a different version of the Ram 1500. Obviously, the TRX gets some unique wheels, some unique tires. These are 35-inch tires from the factory on this particular model, and a ton of aftermarket accessories sponsored by Mopar. That's FCA's in-house performance parts division. Now let's talk about what's going on under the skin, because there have been some pretty significant modifications to the Ram 1500 in order to support the mission of the TRX, which again is a little bit unusual because instead of simply attacking the Ford Raptor head-on, they're giving us a performance pickup truck that is also a Raptor competitor, and that really is an unusual twist here. So again, we have that 6.2-liter supercharged V8 engine under the hood, 702 horsepower, 650 pound-feet of torque. That's mated to an 8 HP 95 automatic transmission. That is the beefiest version of ZF's 8-speed automatic. We also find that under the hood of course, the Hellcat vehicles from the Dodge division and a wide variety of European car companies that are giving us twin-turbo or quad-turbo V12s. After the transmission, we have an all-new Borg-Warner transfer case. The interesting thing about this transfer case, and the reason I really hope this makes its way into other Ram 1500 pickup trucks, is that this is an all-time 4-wheel drive or all-wheel drive transfer case. The difference between all-wheel drive and 4-wheel drive really is lost in marketing. What's more important is the way that this transfer case behaves. It's still a 2-speed transfer case, so it has a full-time lock mode where you can put it into 4-low, and you have a reduction of 2.64 to 1. But what's different about this transfer case versus what we normally find in pickup trucks out there is that when this is in 4-auto, it's not simply going to disconnect the front axle until it's needed, automatically switching it in when you want more oomph up front. This is going to apportion power balanced between the front and rear axle depending on the drive mode that you're in. There's an auto mode, which gives us 60% of the power to the rear. There's a snow mode, which gives us 55% of the power to the rear. There's also a tow-specific mode, which gives us the same power split, but a slightly different algorithm for the way that power is being sent around. Sport mode sends 70% to the rear, still sends 30% to the front, clearly for traction. Baja mode is going to send the most power to the rear. That's 75 to the rear, 25 to the front. There's a 45-55 split for mud and sand. And in the rock crawl mode, it's going to try and split power 50-50. So functionally, this transfer case is going to behave much more like the one that we find in the Grand Cherokee rather than the regular versions of the Ram 1500. After the transfer case, we have an all-new rear axle. It's going to be a Dana 60 axle, and it's going to be available with an open differential, a limited slip differential, or an electronic locking differential. That's going to be your choice there. Ram hasn't given us any detailed specifications on how much stiffer or how much heavier the frame is than the regular Ram 1500, but they have said that almost the entire frame is different. It follows the same shape and same style and mounting points that we find in the regular Ram 1500, but it's a much heavier duty frame. We also have significantly upgraded suspension components that are going to give us 11.8 inches of ground clearance. Also an interesting twist is that we don't find the adaptive air suspension that we find in the regular version of the Ram 1500. Instead, we get an adaptive Bilstein system here. It's the Bilstein E2 Blackhawk Active Performance Shock Absorber System. This is an electronically controlled system with remote reservoirs, so very much like what we find in some of those other off-road focused pickup trucks out there, but this one's going to give us electronic damper control. They've also given us some other detailed specifications here: approach angle of 30.2, departure angle of 23.5, and a breakover angle of 21.9. All that combined with 11.8 inches of ground clearance with the skid plates included. Now, clearly something like a Jeep Wrangler is going to be better off-road than this, but as far as a pickup truck goes, these are some really aggressive numbers. We also have an incredible amount of water fording capability. They're saying that's going to be up to 32 inches. Of course, if the water is still, you clearly don't want to be taking this truck into moving 32 inches of water. I think it's clear by all these numbers that Ram is really trying to give us the Swiss Army knife of pickup trucks here. They're giving us incredible 0 to 60 times, Baja running ability, more traditional off-road ability, and rock crawling ability all in the same vehicle with the full-time all-wheel drive system, the fast 0 to 60 times, etc. And although there are going to be rough and tumble versions of the TRX, there's also going to be a luxury-oriented version here with a hand-wrapped, stitched leather dashboard, very similar to what we find in the upper-end versions of the rest of the Ram 1500 lineup. That top-end version is going to give us a leather and suede interior, they're saying, with available red carbon fiber accents. We also have a new flat-bottom steering wheel. It's very similar to the SRT steering wheels that we find in the current SRT lineup, but this is the newer version of that steering wheel design that we don't really find outside the Ram 1500 lineup. It has a new paddle shifter on the back that is a little bit split because FCA loves to put the radio controls in the back of the steering wheel, and previously that meant that the paddle was just on the top above those radio controls, but this one now has sort of a split yoke design that allows you to have those paddles above and below the radio controls as well. Speaking of the radio, we are not getting Uconnect 5, and I am a little bit disappointed in that. The specification sheet here says it's still going to be Uconnect 4 on the 12-inch screen, but they have updated it, and it gives us Sirius XM 360L with personalized stations by Pandora. There's an available 900-watt 19-speaker sound system. There's an all-new heads-up display, and they've added some additional software to this 12-inch screen that we don't see in the rest of the Ram 1500 lineup. That's going to give us the same sort of performance pages that we typically find in SRT vehicles. The one number that has surprised me on this spec sheet is the tow rating. I had expected it to be a little bit higher. Now, 8,100 pounds is certainly nothing to sniff at, but you will definitely be able to tow more in the regular Ram 1500, and oddly enough, you'll be able to tow more in the upcoming Dodge Durango Hellcat, which uses the same 6.2-liter engine and is an SUV, not a pickup truck. Now, that mainly has to do with the off-road mission of the TRX. Its suspension likely was not set up for towing those heavier weights. It does have a pretty decent payload, but it is lower than some of the other forms of Ram 1500. That plays into this towing rating as well, 1,310 pounds maximum. Now, as always, those payload and towing figures will fluctuate based on the options that you select in your Ram 1500. So if you want everything on your Ram 1500, expect the payload and tow ratings to drop. If you are planning on taking your TRX a little bit further off the beaten path than most folks, you'll appreciate some of these extra touches here. For instance, we have optional full-length rock rails. Those are available. Or you can also get the traditional off-road powder-coated aluminum running boards. The box on the back of the Ram 1500 is kind of interesting because rather than simply adding some fiberglass add-ons to make the box wider in the back, they've given us a unique box. So it's all steel and it's one piece, so it doesn't have any seams, anything funky back there like you'd find in a dually, for instance. And you'll be able to carry 2 spare tires if you want to. There's going to be an available bed-mounted spare tire carrier in addition to the standard full-size spare tire that you'll find underneath the bed. I think the funniest thing about this press release is that it's clearly very focused on Baja running. We have this comment here where it says we have jump detection, which uses wheel speed and ride height sensors and accelerometers to identify when the vehicle is airborne, and then will act to prevent driveline damaging power spikes. Acting in milliseconds, it will alter engine speed and torque, gear selection, transfer case, torque split, damping rates, and other components in order to give you the optimum landing performance. But they also have launch control, which is clearly not a Baja feature. This is an on-road performance-oriented feature, very similar to what we find in the SRT lineup. It's going to manage tire slip while launching the vehicle to give driver consistent straight-line acceleration. You know, if you wanted to take your off-road pickup truck to the drag strip. Much like other SRT vehicles, this is going to help you manage wheel slip, manage wheel hop, which is definitely a problem when you have 650 pound-feet of torque driving a solid rear axle in the back, but all that's going to be handled for you by the launch control system. Be sure and let me know what you think about the absolutely insane Ram 1500 TRX down there in the comments section below. Again, this is one of the worst kept secrets that we've seen in the automotive industry in a long time. Everybody knew that we were going to get a supercharged version of the Ram 1500. We just didn't know exactly what we'd be getting. A lot of folks were assuming that this was going to be strictly Baja focused, and that's why it was going to have a slightly lower horsepower tune of the 6.2-liter supercharged engine to compete more directly with something like that Ford Raptor. But I think a lot of folks have been surprised that Ram is not simply targeting the Raptor, they're also trying to give us the best performance ever in a pickup truck in the US. 4.5 seconds 0 to 60 is mind-blowingly insane for a pickup truck. And this kind of makes me wonder if we're going to see other extreme versions of the Ram 1500 at some point. Clearly, there's room to make a, for instance, street-focused version of the Ram 1500. All they would have to do is probably drop the regular Ram 1500 suspension back in and tweak it to be a little bit lower and a little bit more on-road focused. Let me know what you think about all that down there in the comment section below. Be sure and check out our merch, check out our other videos, and I'll see all of you a little bit later.